Ambassador Quan Daywan stood at the center of the Galactic Council chamber, with his hands folded behind his back. 200 alien delegates sat in rising rows around him, their eyes glowing in colors he had no names for. Some had scales, some had fur, some had bodies made of something that looked like smoke trapped inside glass. All of them looked at him the way a grown man looks at a child trying to sit at the dinner table. He had been speaking for 11 minutes. He was asking for fair trade routes through a region of space called the Outer Veil. It was a simple request. Human cargo ships needed safe passage. Human colonies needed supplies. He had prepared charts, data, and proposals. He had been polite. He had been patient. He had done everything right. High Arbiter Velmon, the ancient creature who led the council, sat in his elevated chair and said nothing. His 6 eyes blinked slowly, one pair at a time. Beside him, Delegate Saran of the Delvari Empire leaned forward and let out a sound that passed for laughter among his kind. "The humans want trade routes," Saran said, his deep voice echoing through the chamber. "How touching. A species that lives barely 100 years wants to plan for the future." Several delegates laughed. Daywan did not react. He stood perfectly still, his face calm, his breathing steady. He waited for the laughter to fade. Then he bowed once, said thank you for your time, and walked back to his seat. A few rows above, observer Elathi of the Peldon race watched him closely. She had lived for over 600 years. She had seen thousands of ambassadors stand at that podium. Most of them reacted to mockery with anger or shame. Daywan did neither. He sat down, opened a small notebook, and began writing. Elathi could not read the human script from this distance, but something about the way his pen moved made her uneasy. He was not writing down his feelings. He was writing down names. 12,000 light-years away, on a green and blue world called Halos 4, a woman named Yo Sumin was walking her daughter to school. The colony was home to 2 million people. It had parks, hospitals, markets, and libraries. Children ran through the streets. Old men played board games under trees that had been brought from Earth as seeds and now grew 30 meters tall. It was morning, and the twin suns made everything glow warm and golden. Sumin's daughter pointed at a bird she did not recognize. Sumin laughed and told her they would look it up together after school. She kissed her daughter's forehead at the gate and watched her run inside. Then she went to work at the colony's water treatment center, where she had worked for 9 years. She had no reason to think it would be her last. In a dark room on the Delvari homeworld, Warlord Grothis pressed his massive fist against a holographic map and drew a line through the outer veil. He was enormous, even by Delvari standards. His skin was the color of iron, and his teeth were built for tearing. He had conquered 11 star systems in his career, and had never once lost a battle. "The humans are in our way," he said to his war council. "They sit on 3 colonies in the Veil corridor. We need that space." Commander Nokon, his most trusted officer, stood at attention. "Should we negotiate with the council for removal rights?" Grothis made a sound like grinding stone. "No, we send a message. Destroy the largest colony. Kill enough of them to make the rest afraid. They will run to the council and beg for help, and the council will do what it always does. Nothing." Nokon hesitated for just a moment. "Which colony?" "Helos 4, Grothis said. 2 million soft creatures living on a world they barely understand. It will take less than a day." He was right about the time. He was wrong about everything else. Nokon's fleet arrived at Helos 4 without warning. 47 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel and filled the sky above the colony like a dark cloud. The colony's defense grid was small. It was designed to stop pirates and asteroids, not an invasion fleet. It lasted 6 minutes. Then the bombardment began. Plasma fire rained from orbit. Buildings collapsed. Streets melted. The water treatment center where Suman worked took a direct hit in the first wave. The hospital went next, then the schools, then the parks where old men had been playing board games under earth-grown trees. The colony managed to send one distress signal before all communications were destroyed. It was a short message, broken and full of static. It said, Helos 4 under attack. Delvari fleet. Civilian population. Please help, please. 6 hours later, the bombardment stopped. 1.7 million people were dead. The remaining 300,000 were left alive in the ruins, burned, broken, and starving. Nokan did not land troops to help them. He did not finish them off either. He left them alive on purpose. Witnesses, Grothes had called them. Let them tell the other humans what happens when you stand in the Delvari's way. The distress signal reached Earth 18 hours later. President Yoon Hada was in the middle of a cabinet meeting when her aide walked in without knocking. His face was white. He placed a tablet on the table and pressed play. The room watched in silence. Footage from orbital cameras showed the colony burning. Ground-level recordings showed people running, screaming, falling. A child standing alone in a street filled with ash, calling for a mother who would never answer. A man trying to dig through rubble with his bare hands, his fingers bloody and broken, refusing to stop. No one in the room spoke. No one moved. President Hana stared at the screen until it went dark. Her hands were trembling, but her face was made of stone. She did not cry. She did not shout. She turned to her aide and said 5 words. Get me Admiral Kang. 1 hour later, Admiral Kang Tae-ho stood in the war room, staring at a holographic display of Helos 4. The planet was covered in red markers. Each marker was a confirmed impact site. Each impact site was a graveyard. His face showed nothing. No anger, no sadness, nothing at all. The officers around him found that more frightening than anything they had seen on the footage. Kang studied the display for a long time. Then he spoke, and his voice was quiet and flat, like a man reading numbers from a page. How many ships do they have? No one in the room knew it yet, but the galaxy had just changed forever. The humans were not going to beg. They were not going to file a complaint. They were not going to cry in front of the council and ask for mercy. They were going to do something far, far worse. They were going to be patient. 3 days after the destruction of Helos 4, Ambassador Kwon Dae-won stood at the podium of the Galactic Council for the second time. This time, he was not asking for trade routes. Behind him, a massive holographic screen showed the ruins of a world that had been full of life less than a week ago. The footage played on a loop. Burning streets, collapsed buildings, a child's shoe sitting alone in a field of ash. The chamber was quiet, but not in the way that meant respect. It was the quiet of discomfort. The delegates shifted in their seats. Some looked away from the screen. Others watched, but with the distant expression of creatures who had seen worse and survived it. Dae-won spoke clearly and without emotion. He presented the evidence. He named the Delvari fleet. He listed the number of dead. 1.7 million. He said the number slowly, letting each word fill the chamber. Then he made his request. He asked the council to condemn the Delvari Empire. He asked for sanctions. He asked for justice. High Arbiter Velmon listened with all 6 eyes half closed. When Dae-won finished, Velmon spoke in his low, ancient voice. The council recognizes the tragedy at Helos 4. We express our deep regret. However, territorial disputes between member species fall outside the scope of collective intervention. Delegate Saran stood next and smiled with all 3 rows of teeth. The colony was built in contested space. The humans were warned. This is a regional matter. They had not been warned. Everyone in the room knew it. No one corrected him. The vote was called. 142 delegates voted against intervention. 58 voted in favor. It was not even close. Dae-won listened to the result. He did not argue. He did not raise his voice. He stood, straightened his jacket, and looked at the chamber one final time. Then we will handle it ourselves. I want this moment on the record. He walked out. His footsteps echoed in the silence. Observer Ilathi watched him leave, and for the first time in her 600-year life, she felt something cold move through her chest. She did not know the human word for it yet. Later, she would learn. The word was dread. On Earth, things began to change. But the change was not loud. It was not dramatic. It was quiet, and that was what made it so terrifying. Within 48 hours of the council vote, Earth closed every port, station, and communication relay near human space. Trade ships stopped departing. Supply contracts went unanswered. Alien merchants who tried to enter human territory were turned away politely but firmly. No explanation was given. No timeline was offered. The galaxy noticed. How could it not? Humanity was not a major power, but it was a reliable trading partner. Dozens of species depended on human goods, human technology, and human transport networks. When all of that stopped overnight, people started asking questions. No one got answers. Behind closed doors, President Yoon Hana sat in a room with her military council and signed an order that had not been signed in over 300 years. Full wartime mobilization. Every shipyard on Earth and its colonies shifted production to warships. Every factory that made civilian goods began making weapons. Every military academy canceled leave and began accelerated training. Reservists were called up. Scientists were reassigned. The entire machinery of human civilization turned, slowly and deliberately, toward a single purpose: war. In a classified laboratory buried deep beneath the surface of Earth's moon, Dr. Oh Minji received a visit she had been dreading. Admiral Kang Tae-ho walked into her lab without an appointment. He was accompanied by 2 officers carrying sealed briefcases. Minji knew what was inside before they opened them. Authorization codes for Project Voidfire. Voidfire was Minji's life's work and her greatest nightmare. She and her team had spent 15 years developing a weapon that could destabilize the core of a star. A directed gravitational pulse, fired at precisely the right frequency, could trigger a chain reaction inside a stellar body. The star would collapse, then erupt in a controlled explosion. Everything within a calculated radius would be destroyed. It was the most powerful weapon any species in the galaxy had ever built, and no one outside of Earth's highest clearance levels knew it existed. It was never supposed to be used. It was a theory, a deterrent, a locked door that everyone agreed should never be opened. Minji looked at Kang and shook her head. Admiral, this weapon was built as a last resort. We cannot simply... He reached into his coat and pulled out a photograph. It was printed on real paper, not displayed on a screen. He placed it on the table in front of her. It showed a school on Helos 4. The left half of the image was bright and full of color, with children playing in a green yard under a golden sky. The right half was black. Ash. Nothing. Minji stared at the photograph for a long time. Then she picked it up, placed it in her pocket, and went back to work. Meanwhile, in the cold black of deep space, Captain Baek-Joon stood on the bridge of the ESS Iron Ghost and read his orders for the 3rd time. The Iron Ghost was Earth's most advanced stealth destroyer. It was built with materials that absorbed every known form of sensor radiation. It made no heat signature. It produced no energy wake. To the rest of the galaxy, it did not exist. Joon's mission was simple in concept and insane in execution. He and his crew were to take the Iron Ghost deep into Delvari space, past their defense lines, past their patrol fleets, past everything. They were to map every military installation, every supply depot, every shipyard, and every weakness in the Delvari Empire's war machine. They were to do this without being detected, If they were caught, Earth would deny their existence. June handed the briefing tablet to his second-in-command, Lieutenant Commander Shin Nari. She read it in silence. When she finished, she looked up at him. "They killed our people," she said. "And they thought we would file a complaint." June almost smiled. "Then let's teach them how humans file complaints." The Iron Ghost slipped out of Earth's orbit without a sound and vanished into the dark. Across the galaxy, the silence from human space grew louder by the day. Other species began to worry. The Peldans sent diplomatic inquiries. The Rathani asked for trade updates. The Virali, who had fought alongside humans in a border skirmish years ago, sent a private message asking if Earth needed help. All of them received the same polite, empty response. "Thank you for your concern. We are managing our affairs internally." Ilithy, unable to shake the feeling in her chest, contacted Daewon directly through a private channel. She asked him plainly, "What is Earth planning?" Daewon's reply came after a delay of exactly 1 hour. It was 3 words long. "We are grieving." Ilithy read the message 7 times. She did not believe it. Grieving species wept and held memorials and asked for help. They did not go silent. They did not close their borders. They did not disappear. Something was coming. She could feel it the way old creatures feel a storm before the sky changes color. 2 weeks after the fall of Helos 4, a Delvari scout ship patrolling the edge of the outer veil detected a faint energy spike on its sensors. It lasted less than a second. The officer on duty noted it in his log and marked it as a minor sensor error, probably caused by background radiation from a nearby nebula. It was not a sensor error. It was the Iron Ghost, passing within 300 meters of the scout's hull, close enough to read the serial numbers on its armor plating. Nari had mapped the ship's entire weapons array in the time it took the Delvari officer to blink. The humans were already inside. The first blow came without warning, without mercy, and without sound. At exactly the same moment, across 3 different star systems, 14 Delvari supply depots exploded. The attacks were simultaneous to the second, as if a single hand had pressed a single button and erased them all at once. Fuel reserves that had taken decades to stockpile burned in an instant. Weapons meant for 1,000 warships melted into floating scrap. Communication relays that connected the Delvari frontline to their homeworld went dark. The entire operation lasted 90 seconds. Then the human ships were gone, pulled back into the black like ghosts returning to their graves. Warlord Grothis received the reports in his war chamber on the Delvari homeworld. He stood perfectly still as his officers read the damage numbers. 14 depots, 3 systems, 90 seconds. He had expected the humans to strike at Helos 4, to try and reclaim their broken colony with tears in their eyes and revenge in their hearts. That was what every other species in the galaxy had done when they were attacked. They hit back at the same place, driven by emotion, and Grothis would have been ready for it. But the humans had not gone to Helos 4. They had reached into the spine of his empire and snapped it, in 3 places. They had hit his supply lines. Without fuel, his ships could not move. Without weapons, they could not fight. Without communications, they could not coordinate. Grothis stared at the map for a long time. Then he said, "They are not fighting like prey." Commander Nokan, standing beside him, said nothing. He was thinking the same thing, but he did not have the courage to say it. The humans were not fighting like prey. They were fighting like something that had been watching, waiting, and learning. Something that knew exactly where to bite. On Helos 4, the ground shook as human dropships broke through the atmosphere. Sergeant Park Soon was the first to step onto the surface. The air tasted like ash and burned metal. The sky, which survivors said had once been a clear and beautiful blue, was now a permanent gray. Sung led his squad through the ruins of the colony's capital. Every street told a story he did not want to read. A market with its stalls collapsed and its goods scattered like broken teeth. A hospital with one wall missing, its beds still inside, some of them still occupied by shapes he did not look at too closely. A school with tiny handprints on the walls, and nothing else. They found survivors in a collapsed shelter beneath what had once been a community center. 43 people, mostly old and young, pressed together in the dark. When the shelter door opened and light poured in, they did not cheer. They just stared, blinking, like animals that had forgotten what safety felt like. A small girl, no older than 5, walked up to Sung and grabbed his arm with both hands. She did not speak. She did not ask for anything. She simply held on and would not let go. Sung looked down at her. Her face was covered in dust, and her eyes were too old for her age. He picked her up and placed her on his back. She wrapped her arms around his neck and buried her face in his shoulder. He carried her for the rest of the operation. When his lieutenant asked if he wanted someone else to take her, Sung shook his head. "She chose me," he said. "I'm not putting her down." While the ground forces secured Helos 4, the war in space entered its most critical moment. Warlord Grothus, furious and humiliated by the supply line attacks, assembled the largest Delvari armada in a century. 800 warships gathered near the Veil Nebula, a massive cloud of gas and dust that marked the border between Delvari and human-controlled space. It was an overwhelming force, the kind of fleet that made other species surrender just by looking at it. Admiral Kang Tae-ho met them with 200 ships. The Delvari fleet outnumbered Earth 4-1. Grothus, watching from his command ship far behind the front line, allowed himself a rare smile. The humans had been clever with their supply line attacks, but cleverness would not save them in open battle. Numbers would win. Numbers always won. That was the law of the galaxy. Kang did not try to match the Delvari formation. He did not line his ships up in rows and trade fire like every other species had done for 1,000 years. Instead, he gave a single order, and his fleet broke apart. 200 ships split into groups of 5. Each group moved independently, weaving through the battlefield in patterns that seemed random, but were not. Every group was connected to every other group through a network that ran faster than thought. When one group fired, 3 others adjusted. When one group dodged, 5 others filled the gap. It was like watching water flow through cracks in a wall. The Delvari could not pin them down. Every time they aimed at a cluster, it had already moved. Every time they turned to face a new threat, another one hit them from behind. Commander Nokan, leading the Delvari fleet from the front, screamed orders into his communication system. "Concentrate fire, hold formation, do not break ranks." But his orders were built for a kind of war that the humans were not fighting. The Delvari trained for rigid, disciplined fleet combat. Lines against lines, walls against walls. They had never seen anything like this. Kang's ships moved like a living thing. They did not fight the Delvari fleet. They took it apart, piece by piece, the way a surgeon removes a tumor. One ship disabled, then another, then 3 more. Small cuts that did not stop. Each cut bleeding the fleet a little more. The battle lasted 4 hours. When it was over, 600 Delvari ships were destroyed or floating dead in space. Earth lost 31. The news reached the Galactic Council within hours. The chamber, which had been buzzing with routine business, went completely silent. No minor species had ever defeated a major empire in open fleet combat. It had never happened, not once in the recorded history of the galaxy. High Arbiter Velmon called an emergency session. Delegate Suron stood and demanded that the Council intervene to stop what he called humanity's illegal aggression. His voice shook, though he tried to hide it. Observer Ilathi stood. The chamber turned to look at her. The Peldan rarely spoke in council sessions. When they did, it mattered. "Delegate Suran," she said calmly, "6 days ago, you told this council that Helos 4 was a regional matter. This body voted 142 to 58 against intervention. You told the humans to handle it themselves." She paused. "They are handling it." Suran opened his mouth, then closed it. The chamber remained silent. Deep in Delvari space, aboard the Iron Ghost, Lieutenant Commander Shin Nari sat in front of a screen filled with intercepted Delvari military communications. Her fingers moved quickly, sorting data, decrypting files, building a picture of the enemy that grew more detailed by the hour. Then she found something that made her stop. It was a planning document, dated 3 months before the attack on Helos 4. It outlined a campaign called The Cleansing Path. Helos 4 was listed as Phase 1. There were 3 more phases, 3 more human colonies, 3 more attacks, 3 more planned massacres of millions of civilians. Helos 4 was not a one-time act of aggression. It was the beginning of a systematic extermination of human presence in the outer veil. Nari's hands went cold. She encrypted the data and transmitted it to Admiral Kang on a priority channel that only 3 people in existence had access to. Kang read it in his quarters aboard the command ship. He sat alone in the dark for a long time. Then he typed a single response. "Then we finish this completely." That same night, President Yoon Hana addressed Earth in a live broadcast. Every screen on every human world and station carried her face. She stood behind a simple podium with no decorations, no flags, and no symbols. Her voice was steady, and her eyes were hard. "We did not start this war," she said, "but I give you my word, we will be the ones to end it, and the galaxy will remember how." She did not explain what that meant. She did not need to. Somewhere in the dark between stars, the Iron Ghost was already moving toward its next target. And in a laboratory beneath the moon, Dr. Oh Min-ji was running the final calculations on a weapon that would make a star die. Earth's fleet moved through Delvari space like a slow fire that could not be put out. System by system, they advanced. They did not rush. They did not scatter. Every jump was planned. Every strike was calculated. And before each battle, they sent the same message to every Delvari ship and station in range. Surrender, and your civilians will be spared. Resist, and your military will not survive. Some commanders surrendered. They opened their hangar doors and powered down their weapons and waited. Earth's forces moved past them without firing a single shot. The surrendered crews were given food, water, and medical care. Their ships were disabled, but not destroyed. It was clean and professional and utterly without hatred. Other commanders chose to fight. They did not survive long. Admiral Kang Tae-ho ran the campaign from the bridge of his command ship with the patience of a man playing a game he had already won. He did not raise his voice. He did not give dramatic speeches. He simply studied the map, moved his pieces, and waited for the Delvari to make mistakes. They always made mistakes. Fear does that to people. It makes them act before they think. On the Delvari homeworld, Warlord Grothus watched his empire shrink. Every day another system went dark. Another fleet reported contact with human ships. Another supply line was cut. His officers brought him reports with trembling hands, and he crushed the tablets they were written on, one after another, until his desk was covered in broken glass and metal. He made his decision on a cold morning, standing alone in his war room. He would not run. He would not scatter his forces across 100 dying systems. He would pull everything back. Every ship, every soldier, every weapon. He would bring them home to Delvar Prime, the heart of his empire, and he would make the humans come to him. 400 warships gathered in orbit around the homeworld. Grothis ordered the construction of new orbital defense platforms. He activated the planetary shield generators that had not been powered on in 2 centuries. He turned Delvar Prime into a fortress, layered with guns and armor and the desperate fury of a cornered animal. Then he sent a message to the galaxy. His voice was deep and full of forced confidence. The humans have fought well in the empty spaces between stars. But space is not where wars are won. Wars are won on the ground, around homes, around things that matter. Let them come to Delvar Prime. They will break against us like water on stone. The message played across every communication network in the galaxy. Grothis wanted the Council to see him standing strong. He wanted other species to fear getting involved. Most of all, he wanted the humans to hear him and feel doubt. Admiral Kang heard the message in his quarters. He listened to it once, then turned it off. He pulled up the tactical projections for a direct assault on Delvar Prime. The numbers were clear. He could win, but the cost would be enormous. Tens of thousands of human lives, possibly hundreds of thousands. Ship losses that would take a decade to replace. All to break through the defenses of a planet that had been built to resist exactly this kind of attack. Kang sat with those numbers for a long time. He thought about the soldiers on his ships, the young men and women who had volunteered for this war because they had seen the footage from Helos 4 and could not sleep at night. They would fight if he asked them to. They would die if he ordered them to. He knew that, and he refused to do it. He contacted President Yoon Hana on a secured channel. His face appeared on her screen, and even across the vast distance between them, she could see the weight in his eyes. "I can take Delvar Prime by force," he said. "But I will not spend human lives to break through a wall when I have a key that can open it." Hana understood immediately. Void fire. "Not against the homeworld," Kang said. "Against Korath Prime." Korath Prime was the Delvari Empire's largest military staging system. It was not a planet, but a star surrounded by rings of shipyards, weapons factories, fuel refineries, and barrack stations. It was the place where Delvari warships were born, armed, and sent out to fight. It was the beating heart of their military machine, and it had no civilian population. Every soul in the Korath system was military. Hana was silent for a long time. She asked Kang to connect Dr. O. Minji to the call. Minji appeared on a second screen, her eyes tired, her hair pulled back, her lab coat stained with something dark. "Can you target just the Korath system?" Hana asked. "Yes," Minji said. "The pulse can be calibrated to destabilize the Korath star specifically. The blast radius will consume the military installations in orbit. Nothing outside the system will be affected. Civilian casualties? 0. There are no civilians in Korath. It is a military-only zone." Hana closed her eyes. When she opened them, her face was the face of a woman who had accepted a burden she would carry for the rest of her life. "Do it." The Iron Ghost received its final mission orders 12 hours later. Captain Baekjun read them in the quiet of his cabin. The Voidfire device had been loaded into the ship's cargo hold during a rendezvous with a classified supply vessel. It was smaller than he had expected. It looked like a metal cylinder about the size of a coffin, covered in symbols and warning labels in 6 languages. It hummed faintly, as if something inside it was breathing. June briefed his crew. He did not sugarcoat what they were about to do. "We are going to collapse a star," he said. "There is no other way to say it. The people in that system are soldiers who serve the Empire that burned Halos 4. There are no civilians, but what we do today will change everything. Every species in the galaxy will see what we are capable of. There is no going back from this." The bridge was silent. Then Lieutenant Commander Shin Nari, sitting at her station, spoke without looking up from her screens. There was no going back from the moment they touched Halos. No one disagreed. The Iron Ghost slipped into the Korath system like a shadow moving across a dark room. Nari guided them through the defense grid using the maps she had spent weeks building. Every patrol route, every sensor gap, every blind spot was cataloged and memorized. They moved through the system without triggering a single alarm. When they reached the optimal firing position, June gave the order. Nari's fingers moved across her console. The Voidfire device activated. A pulse of energy, invisible to the eye, but powerful beyond description, shot from the Iron Ghost and struck the star at the center of the Korath system. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the star flickered. It was subtle at first, like a candle in a slight wind. Then it flickered again, harder. The surface of the star began to ripple. Deep inside its core, forces that had been stable for billions of years began to tear themselves apart. The star collapsed inward. It shrank, pulling its own fire into itself like a fist closing. The shipyards in orbit began to shake. Alarms screamed across every station. Delvari officers ran to their escape pods, but there was no time. The collapse lasted 40 minutes. 40 minutes of a star dying in slow, terrible silence. Then it erupted. The explosion was not natural. It was controlled, shaped, directed. A wave of fire and energy burst outward from the dead core and consumed everything in the system. 2,000 warships were vaporized in seconds. Dozens of shipyards, each one the size of a small moon, were turned to dust. Weapons factories that had produced arms for a century were erased as if they had never existed. When the light faded, there was nothing left. The Korath system was gone. Where a star had burned for 5 billion years, there was now only a cloud of cooling gas and the fading glow of something that should never have been possible. Every sensor array in the galaxy detected the event. Every observatory, every deep space probe, every ship with a basic scanner saw the same thing. A star had died, not from natural causes, not from age or instability. It had been killed by humans. Silence fell across the galaxy like a heavy cloth dropped over a cage. Communication channels that were normally filled with chatter went quiet. Governments that had been watching the war with casual interest suddenly stopped everything and stared at their screens. The Peldean issued a formal statement within the hour. We urge all parties to seek immediate peace. Observer Ilithy sent a private message to Ambassador Dewan. She did not ask what Earth was planning. That question no longer mattered. She asked something simpler. What will it take for you to stop? Dewan's reply was precise. Unconditional surrender, a formal apology before the full council, reparations for every life lost on Helos 4, and Grothis in chains. On his flagship above Delvar Prime, Warlord Grothis stood at the viewport and watched the sensor data scroll across his screen. The light from the dead star of Korath Prime, already hours old by the time it reached him, reflected in his dark eyes. He pressed them flat against the console to make them stop, but they would not. He had called the humans water. He had said they would break against stone. He had been wrong. Water does not break against stone. It goes around it, under it, and through it, and given enough time and enough force, it wears the stone down to nothing. It was not Grothis who surrendered. It was his own generals. 3 days after the death of Korath Prime, 12 of the Delvari Empire's highest-ranking military officers walked into Grothis's war chamber and told him it was over. He roared at them. He threw a chair across the room. He called them cowards and traitors, and every foul word his language had a name for. But the generals did not leave. They stood in a line and waited for him to finish, and when his voice finally broke, they told him again. It was over. The terms were accepted. Every ship in the Delvari fleet powered down its weapons. Every station opened its doors. Grothus was placed in restraints made from a metal he did not recognize, something humans had built specifically for the occasion, and escorted to a shuttle. The shuttle carried him to the ESS Iron Ghost. Captain Bake June stood at the airlock and watched them bring Grothus aboard. His shoulders nearly touched both sides of the corridor. His iron-colored skin was dull and cracked, as if the fight had drained something out of him that went deeper than energy. He towered over every human on the ship by at least a full head, but he did not meet June's eyes, not once. They'd placed him in a holding cell that had been prepared with care. It was clean, well lit, and had a bed large enough for his body. There was water and food waiting for him. June had ordered it himself. He did not hate Grothus. He did not feel anything toward him at all. The warlord was a problem that had been solved, nothing more. Nari watched the whole thing from the bridge on the security feed. She said nothing. She had not said much since Korath Prime. None of them had. 1 week later, the full Galactic Council assembled for what would become the most remembered session in its history. Delegates who had not attended a session in decades made the journey. Observers from races that had no official council membership requested and received permission to watch. The chamber was packed, standing room only, and yet it was quieter than it had ever been. Ambassador Quan Dewan entered through the main doors. He wore a simple dark suit. No medals, no symbols, no entourage, no guards. He walked alone down the long center aisle, his footsteps the only sound in the chamber. 200 pairs of alien eyes followed him. Some of those eyes had 6 lenses, some glowed. Some were older than human civilization itself. All of them watched a single man walk to the podium, as if the weight of a galaxy meant nothing to him. Behind him, 3 holographic displays activated. The first showed Helos 4, the colony as it had been before the attack, green and bright and full of life, and then the ruins, gray and dead and burning. The second showed the Battle of the Veil Nebula, with the Delvari fleet shattering like glass against a force 1/4 its size. The third showed Korath Prime, a star alive, then a star dead, killed by a species that the Council had laughed at less than 2 months ago. Dewan placed his hands on the podium. He did not grip it. He did not lean on it. He simply rested his hands there, as if he had all the time in the world. 40 years ago, he began, his voice soft, but clear enough to reach every corner of the chamber. Humanity joined this council. We were young. We were small. We asked for nothing but fairness. We were given silence. He paused. No one moved. When our people were slaughtered, we came to this chamber and asked for justice. We presented evidence. We named the dead. We asked you to act. We were given indifference. His eyes moved slowly across the rows of delegates. Some looked away. Most could not. So we delivered justice ourselves. The holographic display behind him shifted. It showed the dead star of Korath Prime one more time, a ghost of light fading into nothing. We did not enjoy this, Dewan said. We are not proud of the star we killed. We built that weapon hoping we would never use it. You made us use it. Every species in this chamber that voted against helping us shares the weight of what happened at Korath Prime. That is not an accusation. It is a fact. Carry it however you choose. He reached into his jacket and placed a small data chip on the podium. It clicked against the surface, and the sound was somehow louder than anything else in the room. These are our terms for permanent peace. They are not negotiable. You have 1 solar cycle to accept them. He bowed once. It was the same bow he had given months ago when Saran had mocked him and the chamber had laughed. The same bow, the same posture, the same calm. But this time, no one laughed. No one breathed. Dewan turned and walked out. His footsteps echoed through the chamber, long after the doors closed behind him. No one followed. No one objected. High Arbiter Velmon sat in his elevated chair, with all 6 eyes wide open. And for the first time in his ancient life, he had nothing to say. The terms were accepted unanimously within hours. No debate, no amendments, no objections. Full reparations for Halos 4, a permanent demilitarized zone around all human territory. Grothis to stand trial before an independent tribunal. And a new council law, proposed by humanity and accepted by every member, called the Halos Doctrine. It stated that any unprovoked attack on a civilian population would trigger an automatic collective military response from the entire council. No votes, no debates, no delays. Attack civilians, and every fleet in the galaxy comes for you. The galaxy accepted it because the alternative was letting humans handle things their own way, and no one wanted that. Not anymore. In the weeks that followed, the war ended quietly, not with celebrations or parades, but with exhaustion and silence and the slow, heavy work of putting broken things back together. Sergeant Park Sung returned to Helos 4. The colony was being rebuilt, slowly, with new buildings rising from the ashes of the old ones. He visited the little girl he had carried on his back during the ground operation. Her name was Choi Yuna. She was 5 years old, and she had lost everyone. A military family had taken her in, and when Sung arrived at their door, Yuna ran to him and grabbed his arm the same way she had done in the ruins. He knelt down and held her, and neither of them said anything for a long time. Shin Nari sat alone in the observation deck of the Iron Ghost, staring out at the stars. She had not slept properly since Korath Prime. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the star collapsing, folding in on itself, like something alive, trying to hold its own heart together. She knew the Korath system had been military only. She knew no civilians had died. But she also knew that she had pressed the buttons that killed a star, and that knowledge sat inside her chest like a stone that would never dissolve. Dr. O. Minji returned to her laboratory beneath the moon. She gathered her team, looked at each of them, and said, "Lock the Voidfire files. Highest clearance. Destroy the prototype. We never build another one." No one argued. They had seen what they had created, and they wanted it gone. Admiral Kang Taeho resigned his commission. He did it quietly, with a single letter to President Hana. He did not explain his reasons. He did not need to. He moved to a small house on the coast of Jeju Island, where the sound of waves was louder than his thoughts, and he spent his mornings walking on the beach alone. Sometimes he stood at the water's edge and looked out at the horizon, and no one who saw him could tell if he was at peace or simply too tired to fight anymore. President Yoon Hana stood at her office window on the night the peace was finalized. The city below was bright with lights, and somewhere in the distance she could hear music. People were celebrating. She was not. She looked at her reflection in the glass and saw a woman who had ordered a star to die. She had done it to save lives. She believed that. But she also knew that the galaxy would never see humanity the same way again. They would see the species that killed a star. And she had made that choice. On the council station, Observer Ilathi filed her final report to the Peldan government. She had spent months observing humanity, studying their behavior, analyzing their decisions. She had watched them grieve, mobilize, fight, and win. She had watched them break an empire and rewrite galactic law. And now she sat at her desk and wrote the last paragraph of her report. I have studied 4,000 species across 12 galaxies. I have seen empires rise and fall. I have witnessed wars that burned for centuries and peace that lasted for millennia. But I have never encountered a species like the humans. They do not fight for territory. They do not fight for resources or power or glory. They fight because someone hurt their people. And when that happens, they will burn the universe to ash before they allow it to happen again. They are not the strongest species. They are not the oldest, but they are, without question, the most dangerous. Because their fury is not mindless. It is patient and precise, and it remembers everything. Do not provoke them. Whatever you do, do not provoke them. Far away from the council, far from the fleets and the politics and the holographic displays, Daewon sat alone in his small apartment. He removed his jacket. He loosened his tie. He poured himself a glass of something strong and sat at his desk. On the desk was a framed photograph of a young woman with a bright smile and kind eyes, his younger sister. She had lived on Helos 4. She had been a teacher at the school with the tiny handprints on the walls. She did not survive. He looked at her picture for a long time. He did not cry. He had cried already, alone, in the dark, on nights when no one could hear him. Now he simply looked at her and let the silence sit between them like a conversation that would never end. Then he set down his glass, and he began writing a new proposal for the council. A humanitarian aid initiative for displaced populations across the galaxy. Not just human populations, all populations. Every species that had ever lost a home and had no one to help them rebuild. Because that is what humans do. They grieve, they rage, they destroy when they must. And then, when the fire dies down and the smoke clears, they pick up their tools and start building again. Not just for themselves, for everyone. 200 years later, a historian researching the Galactic Council's archive found a single entry in the records. It was a footnote, buried deep in a file about interspecies military law. It read, "The Helos Doctrine has never been invoked. No species has attacked a civilian population since its ratification." When asked why, most ambassadors give the same answer. Because we remember what the humans did, and we would rather not find out what they would do next. The footnote had no author, but someone at some point had added a small annotation in the margin. It was written in Korean, in handwriting that was neat and careful and steady. It said, "For Helos, for everyone we lost, we remember."